Greece is mountainous. Overland travel is difficult. Most of the city's trade happens with the island states of the Aegean. So Pericles focuses attention on protecting the route to the port at Piraeus. He builds a third wall running straight to the harbor. This wall creates a defensible corridor. Though narrow, it means that whatever happens, Athens is connected to the sea. Even by modern standards, this would be a major public building project. Like the construction of a freeway, the building of the wall forces its way through private houses and farms. It crosses rivers. It divides communities and separates people from their land. But to Pericles, the disruption is a price worth paying. Athens has to be ready to fight. Today, nothing remains of Pericles' wall, but this fortification at Athena is very similar. It provides investigators with the best clues to what Athens' long walls would have looked like.
The wall that he built would have been of smaller stones than this, I imagine, for 4 meters or so, 12 feet, and then above that, mud brick for another, say, 3 or 4 meters.
2 external stone faces were filled with rubble. Above the foundation lay low stone called socle. On top of that, there was mud brick. The walls were about 16 feet wide and 30 feet high. They were 8.5 miles long. It was Pericles' intention that they would be unbreachable. The key to that lay in the way they were manned. Weapons expert Mike Lodes has been investigating the way Pericles policed these defenses. He would rely on a rapid reaction force of mounted troops to travel up and down their length.
The Athenians recruited 300 cavalry. Now, that's a fascinating direct link between Pericles' long walls and cavalry. This was the start of Greek cavalry.
Mounted troops were a major innovation in ancient Greek warfare.
Cavalry can patrol along the walls. Cavalry can be shot out from postern gates at a moment's notice to go to the moment of trouble. And cavalry can patrol the countryside to protect that agricultural infrastructure.
Postern gates were located at regular intervals along the walls. High towers and ramparts offered another level of security.
The Athenian police and watchmen were recruited from Scythian archers. The Scythians were this people from north of the Black Sea. And they had these wonderful, strong, powerful, recurve bows made of horn and sinew. We've got a range of about 250, 300 yards. So anybody trying to lay any sort of siege work out there, these archers are going to be picking them off, and they would stand no chance.
It wasn't just arrows that attackers had to fear. Pericles also stationed men armed with slingshots along the walls. They were effectively the snipers of their day.
And their slingshot was cast in lead, so it has weight. It's aerodynamically shaped like a bullet. This would kill a man. And in fact, this is a copy of one that's in the British Museum, an original Greek slingshot, and it says the words Dexa, which means take that. It's a wonderful millennia-old bit of soldier's wit. You simply place the sling in the basket and hurl it.
Built before the development of siege warfare, these walls were never breached in Pericles' time. No army had the technical or logistical skill to bring them down. It meant that Pericles could confidently try to seize the advantage. He could take his country to war.
The war began because there were 2 main cities in Greece, Athens and Sparta. Both were ambitious to be the leaders of the Greek world, and it was a case of 2 big kids on the block, and there was only room for one. So war was inevitable.
The golden age of Athens was about to come to a dramatic end. Pericles plans to gamble everything he has built, everything his people have worked for, on the strength of his mighty navy. We will uncover the lost world of the Greek warship. (431 BC). As Pericles predicts, the forces of Sparta invade Athenian territory, and Pericles responds in a way that shocks his own people. Having strengthened the city's fortifications, he now puts all his faith in them. He orders the people of the countryside to abandon their homes and take refuge behind the walls of Athens. Many see it as cowardice. And so the Athenians watch as 60,000 Spartans rampage and destroy. Pericles' reasoning is that the Spartan army is too strong. To take them on land would be to lose. Instead, he will carry the battle to the sea, passing troops down the narrow, protected corridor that links Athens to the harbor at Piraeus. He will attack Sparta using a fleet of highly advanced, deadly warships, his triremes.
Certainly we can say that Athens had the best navy in the Mediterranean in the 5th century BC. One reason for this was because Athens' income from empire allowed her to pay her crews to train longer and harder than anybody else's crews.
No archaeologist has ever found remains of a trireme, but our investigators have pieced together the story of what must have been an awesome feat of marine and military engineering. The tri in trireme refers to the key innovation that set these ships apart. 3 banks of oars, one on top of another, gave it massive power.
Earlier oared warships had rowers at 2 different levels. By adding a 3rd level of rowers, you got half as much power again within the same length of hull. So it made the ships faster and more maneuverable.
From ancient drawings of the triremes, the designer's intention is clear. They wanted to use this extra power to brutal effect. Boris Rankov believes that the front of each ship was reinforced to make a ram.
The ram was essentially a projection at the bow of a ship ensheathed in bronze with cutting edges on, and this was used to ram into other ships and knock holes in their hulls.
So the trireme was basically a guided missile. The idea was that it would penetrate the hull of an enemy ship, cause maximum damage, and then move off. Success was dependent on the skill of the person at the helm. To work effectively, the ram had to impact at a speed of 10 knots. And if it was too late or too early, the trireme's vulnerable sides would be exposed. Boris Rankov believes that the ships must have been built from an extremely light wood.
Flat out, they could probably manage something like between 9 and 10 knots. A ship of 50 tons with 200 men on board, traveling at nearly 10 knots, is really quite impressive.
Only by investigating the remains of ancient boathouses can experts estimate the size of triremes. They may have been as much as 120 feet long. Boris's reconstructions make it clear that their deployment required a massive amount of muscle. 170 men in 3 files, each man wielding an oar up to 13 feet long. Pericles' fleet was vast. Accounts from the beginning of the war with Sparta suggest that he had 300 ships at his disposal. With around 200 sailors per ship, that's a navy of 60,000 men. And there were other people on board each ship. Each one also transported soldiers called hoplites. Disembarking at strategic locations deep in Spartan territory, they would have quickly done damage to their enemy, then sailed away. Weapons expert Mike Lodes reveals the kind of tactic the hoplites used in battle.
You would have vast phalanxes of hoplites, infantry, armed with a spear and a shield, would charge each other, meeting with an explosive energy, shoving and pushing and jabbing and stabbing their spears deep into the enemy ranks. It was a war of attrition. Imagine that behind Richard there are 600 hoplites, 8 to 12 rows deep. Now the first 2 or 3 ranks are going to be able to reach with their spears into the enemy lines. But behind that, the men are muscle and weight.
With these highly skilled troops and the power of the triremes behind them, it appears that Pericles has the means to snatch a quick victory over the Spartans. But that victory doesn't come. The Spartans invade and attack the walls of Athens 5 times in 10 years. Each time they are forced to pull back, but keep returning. Gradually, the Athenians are worn down. And then Pericles' people come under attack in a way that they could never have foreseen, because their ships, their greatest strength, return from foreign ports carrying disease. Thousands of people are crowded behind the city walls, and in these cramped conditions, an unnamed plague wreaks havoc. A quarter of the population dies.
The Athenians, for the first time in 50 years, lost all hope. The number of them that died seems to have been extraordinary. The physical suffering that went on. People didn't die for a week or 10 days. Bits of their bodies rotted and fell off. They coughed their lungs up. They were covered in disgusting rashes. And there was probably an absolutely appalling smell of putrefying corpses on top of the smell of the foul water which had happened because so many people were confined within the long walls, and the sewage.
Pericles did not escape. The man who had built the Parthenon, nursed democracy through its infancy, fortified his city and led it for decades with vision and daring, was as vulnerable as anyone else. He died. No one has ever been able to put a name to the disease which caused so much destruction. But recent findings suggest that all these people were probably killed by typhoid.
Typhoid can be a very nasty disease. It can cause rising fever, you can become unconscious, delirious, you can get perforation of the bowel, blood uncontrollably coming out of your intestines.
When Pericles died in the plague, it left a huge hole in Athenian political life. And this left a power vacuum that all kinds of probably less able people strove to fill.
Athens was physically and psychologically beaten. Finally, in 404 BC, after vicious internal fighting and a series of military disasters, the city was forced to surrender to the Spartans. Though the defenses that Pericles built had never been overcome, his city was humbled by its bitterest enemy. It had taken 30 years to build. Within one generation, it was brought low by war and disease. And yet this doesn't detract from what Pericles achieved. The city he built set a blueprint for Western civilization. Its influence can still be felt. Its legacy does not